So getting into the topics, I would say that as far as my foray into understanding food and agriculture specifically, um, around the teenage years, a lot of people started getting into seriously into whatever they get into, and that was the time I started getting into politics. And I got my first job at a In-N-Out Burger. I don't know how close they are into the Central California, but I stay in Southern. I'm from Southern California, around Los Angeles,
Okay.
so they're all over the damn place. And first job, and so I'd go, we'd go to restaurants and done all this stuff before. It wasn't until then that I started to really understand food. Um,
Mm.
because of course, you're getting all these different, meats, and produce, and poultry, and all this stuff. And naturally, the question comes about: well, if we're only supposed to keep a certain amount of things for a certain amount of time, even with all the refrigeration and whatnot, then what do we do with the rest of this stuff? And it's just like you're just throwing you just see hundreds, thousands, sometimes thousands of dollars worth of food trash. So then the next question starts coming up naturally. Hey, why can't we just give this food to the people who are obviously starving, or even people
Mm.
who we know are working that are struggling to put food on the table consistently? And start to hear all these things about, liability from foodborne illnesses, want anybody to sue us and whatnot, have too much attention. And really, what it comes down to is that, yeah, while part of it does come from that fear of liability and everything, somebody who is starving, for the most part, isn't going to turn away a good hot meal. Yeah, they'll be, upset if things don't go right, but preserving food and preparing it right really isn't the most difficult thing in the world. There's
Mm.
just a lot of stigmas around not giving people free stuff, um, giving people feeling like if they didn't work for it, then they didn't, deserve it, even though we already pay into the system in so many different ways and don't get, saying the full value of our investment, you could say. And
Mm.
that was kind of like the first, instance when I was seeing these, and to give you some numbers, it's estimated that food waste around the world is between 25 and 33%. So that means
Mhm.
at different stages of production and distribution and whatnot and consumption, a good fourth to a third of all food that's manufactured in the world is destroyed. Unfortunately, I didn't get any official numbers on how many people go homeless, or excuse me, how many people go hungry. But in the United States, it's estimated that around one sixth to one fifth of all households don't have consistent food consumption. Whether it's
Mhm.
living in a desert or just not having the finances and whatnot. And you could say that once you start compiling these bits of information together, it really makes you start to question and get like really more agitated with the system and the laws as they are. You
Mhm.
start to realize that there are certain laws in place that really shouldn't be there, or there's even something called the 1996 Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Law, which protects restaurants from the liability from criminal and civil litigation. Um, and you start learning again about like the cultural stigma and about people being leeches and brains in the system and whatnot. So that was kind of like my initial stages of coming to understand the issue and just how pervasive it is.
Mhm. So in terms of the food waste, just to throw a couple more numbers at onto your plate that you already mentioned, yeah, the food waste in the United States alone is about 40%, which is pretty huge considering how much food and how many people we have in this country. And the United States is one of the worst countries about food waste, but we also have one of the um, lowest rates of like just for example like the amount of disposable income that we use on food is such a low percentage in the United States compared to other countries that we almost have the luxury of being able to waste food. Like in other countries, they may spend 50 to 60 to 75% of their income on food. We spend like I don't remember what the exact numbers are, but I think it's like less than 5% of our income on food. Like we spend so little on food compared to what we spend on other things that we almost have the luxury of being able to waste food, which isn't a good luxury to have, obviously, because there are still some people in the United States who can't afford that or who don't have access to it because of one reason or another. Like you mentioned, food deserts is a thing that happens, or sometimes it's the way the income works in certain areas of the country or whatever it is. But the issue of food waste is one that we've been trying to figure out for a while, especially from the agricultural sector. Because on the agricultural side of things, we don't like food being wasted either. A lot of the time, the food gets wasted on the farm, because usually most of the food waste happens at the consumer level. Usually it's at the restaurant or it's at the actual consumer's plate, and they throw away leftovers, or they like let's just say like you mentioned, some meat goes bad, or if it's been refrigerated, it hasn't been refrigerated for long enough, or it's whatever the case may be, and you throw it out. A lot of that happens on the consumer level. On the agricultural level, we try to minimize waste as much as possible. It still happens. I'm not going to lie and say that it doesn't happen. A lot of the waste that happens on the agricultural level, though, tends to happen from the perspective of the consumers aren't going to buy this, so I'm going to throw it out. That's typically the mindset that goes into it. Like it might be, so like, just for example, oranges. You'll see a lot of oranges in stores that don't have any scratches, any bumps, any bruises on them. Typically, that's because they get thrown out before they even reach that point, because people are scared that consumers aren't going to buy them. Those oranges may not be they may not have anything wrong with them. So I work in a grocery store, and every day I go through and look at our oranges, and I look through and find the ones that have the bumps and the scratches and the bruises, and I leave those there. I just find the ones that have what we call blemishes, that are they're so bad that the fruit's going to rot like tomorrow, basically. I'll find stuff that has like sunburns on it, or it has split skin, or it has like punctures all over it, like whatever. If it's fruit that's not going to be good, I'll throw that out. But everything else, if I have a customer that doesn't want to buy a fruit because it has a mark on it, I'd be sure to explain to them, like, hey, this mark isn't a bad thing. It means that the insect was biting right here, and it didn't pierce through the skin, which is actually a good thing, because that means the insect probably thought this was a healthy piece of fruit. So you should probably, it probably tastes better, honestly. Like, I actually personally try to buy the fruit that does have a lot of marks on it, because it usually means it tastes better. But that's a thing that we've kind of bred into our society, is like this consumerist. We're very cosmetic based with our consumerism. We like things that look good, not necessarily things that taste good or are good for us. And so you'll see a lot of food waste happening with food that just doesn't look good. It may not have anything wrong with it, but it just doesn't look how the consumer wants it to look. And so that causes a lot of food waste as well. So I think that part of the issue is with, agricultural literacy, with education, with kind of, helping create this stigma of, not all food that looks bad is bad for you. You need to kind of get, like, just getting people out of that mindset will help fix some of it. But on the side of it that you're talking about, the side of it where, the food that we're already wasting, why can't we give that to, lower income families, or homeless people, or people who can't afford it, or, whatever? I honestly don't see a problem with that. Obviously the liability issue is one that people like to bring up a lot, but like you mentioned, there's legislation that protects, it protects people in restaurants and producers from getting hurt from that situation. And like you mentioned, families that are that hungry aren't going to care. They're gonna go for either way, because it's either they get sick or they die. Like they're gonna have to pick one. And so you'll see a lot of that. I personally can't really tell you why we're not getting more wasted food to those families. I'd be all for that. I just think that there needs to be some kind of better infrastructure for being able to distribute it, because a lot of the time what happens is, if you have a bunch of free food and you just say come take it, then one person will take it all and nobody else will have any. So you need to have some kind of better distribution method of getting that food out there. I think that's part of the issue, is that just nobody wants to put in the effort to have the distribution method established. And another part of it, and this is the part that I can somewhat understand, but I also see the other side of, is that people are fearful that, obviously giving away free food is going to de-incentivize working. I don't necessarily see that to be the case as much as some people argue it is. I think that it can be. Like, I don't think that, personally, I personally don't believe that everyone needs to have free food all the time. I think that those who can't work, or who are working but aren't making enough, they need some kind of help, because obviously, there's always like the argument that we have a right to food. I personally say that we have a right to life, and that food is necessary for life. And so that not necessarily that we have a right to food, but more that we have a right to means of obtaining things that will keep us alive. And so if we have a right to the things that are helping us stay alive, and we're still not getting them, that's where the issue starts to come in. So I think that not necessarily providing free food to everyone is the answer. I think that having some kind of a way of still incentivizing work, but still making sure that those families don't go hungry every night, and making sure that there's enough food for everyone to go around, and making sure that there's enough food that's not going to get stolen or go bad or cause people to get sick. So at the end of the day, like, we're not, we don't want to give our rotten cheese to this family that's going hungry, because at the end of the day, we still don't want them to get sick. We still don't want them to die. We still have to be careful with our food safety procedures, because the United States prides itself in being the safest food supply in the world, and it is. But there still needs to be some level of control in how we regulate the food that's wasted and the food that we shouldn't be wasting that we could put somewhere else. So I don't know if that answers your question, but those are kind of my thoughts on the matter.
Oh yeah, I mean, it was just a question. I just wanted to, get your feedback. I like those points. I fully, agree with them, and that, yeah, there's that other side of, the consumerist angle and people's obsession with, cosmetic thing and concern over blemishes.
Hmm.
Because even myself, what I'm saying is I try to be, more conscious than the average person. It's like
Hmm.
I can go in my fridge right now with the fruits and vegetables that I just picked out, and I picked, the prettiest ones that I could find. Just like most people. Um,
Yep.
so it's like that's definitely a factor. As a matter of fact, have you heard of a company called I think it's called Ugly Produce?
Hmm.
So I don't know if it's a nonprofit or just like a small operation or whatnot, but basically what they do is that all those fruits and vegetables or produce, like you mentioned, that have blemishes or that seem unsightly, they get them, and to those whom want them, you can hit them up, and I don't, pay a smaller fee, and they will deliver to you some of these vegetables and fruits and whatnot that are, fully, good to eat, but that get discarded before they even hit the shelves at grocery stores.
Interesting. Yeah, I've never heard of them. That's actually a really interesting concept, though. If we can get more stuff like that going, or at least more, some kind of like education program to get the word out there that like I don't have the answers on how to actually implement it, but if we could find a way to push that, that idea that ugly food is not bad for you thing, that like just because a banana's got a little bit of brown on it doesn't mean you're gonna die, or that if an orange has a scratch on it, it's not gonna make you sick. Like if we could have some kind of way of pushing some of that kind of stuff more effectively, then that'd be great. I mean, that's kind of what I'm trying to do with the podcast is to try to get more of a conversation about this kind of stuff happening in general. And so maybe that's the place to start is just trying to have more conversations, trying to get more engagement. That's why I mean I try to do that everywhere I can. I teach my customers that I teach, about fruit and about food, and trying to teach people that like just because this looks funny doesn't mean it's bad. Don't throw it out just yet. That kind of stuff. Like, and if you teach, if you explain that kind of stuff to someone, they understand it and they actually appreciate it. But like, it's just for some reason, like in the heat of the moment, just like buying food and just going, our brain almost like shuts off and we're just like, oh, that one looks pretty, I'll grab that one. Instead of actually like taking the time to think about, okay, well maybe I should try to buy the ones that aren't as pretty, just because of it. If I don't, they might get thrown out. And as we start to move towards that, we might actually move to a place where we don't throw out the ones before they hit the shelf after all. Like maybe we throw out the ones that are going to go bad, but the ones that aren't, that just kind of look like they might go bad, we might actually be able to sell those more effectively. And that can actually reduce some of our numbers too.